Second type of or second approach of a thread or define a thread is defining a thread by implementing runnable interface. Defining a thread by implementing runnable interface. So, runnable interface present in java.lang package and it contain only one method, that is run. So, it belongs to java.lang package and it has only one method, that is run. So, run method. So, how can I write? So, let us see, if I want to define a thread by using runnable interface. For example, I am writing a class whose name is my runnable. So, you can take any name, no problem. So, my runnable. So, this just is a name, you can give any name also. So, first you have to remember that we have to implement, you know that about the interface, that when we want to implement something, that means implements runnable interface. So, I am going to implement runnable interface, RUNNABLE, runnable interface, that is our body. So, under that we have to override the run method. So, public void run, and within run method, suppose I am giving some tasks to the child thread. For example, I am just going to print the child thread 10 times. So, for int I equal to 0, I less than 10, I plus plus. So, within for loop system.out.println, I am to print my child thread. So, child thread, give the message child thread, I want to print this string child thread. So, this is called defining a thread. This is called defining a thread. Defining a thread. So, in this way we can define a thread by using implementing runnable. So, you know that it is a new condition of a thread, new or bound condition of a thread. Defining a thread means, so just I have defined a thread. So, class, then class name, you can give any name, then implements runnable. So, that means I am going to implement the runnable interface, and within the runnable interface, within this class I have just overwrite the run method, public void run, whatever the content has been given, that content will be executed, but that is the job for child thread. So, that is the job for child thread by executed by the job executed by child thread. Now, we have defining a thread. So, how can I create instance of a thread class? So, I am just taking the simple one. So, I am giving the same name of this class of the previous example. I have the name of the class is thread demo. You can give any name. Then within this class, first we have to write within the public static void main. Within the main method, I have pass argument string args, and with this the main method, I have just create instance of a class. So, that means I am just creating the object of a class. Suppose I want to access this class, I want to access this run method. So, I want to call this run method. That means we have to create the object of this class. So, what is the name of this class? My runnable. So, I am just my runnable. This is the name of a class according to my example. So, runnable, for example, this is my R. So, you can give any name, no problem. So, that is the reference variable, you can give any name. Then new runnable, no argument constructor is called. then we have to create instance of a thread class. Then we have to create instance of a thread class. For example, thread T equal to new thread. New thread. Okay. Then we have to call the start method. Look at this. After this point, so up to this point, my runnable are equal to new runnable. So main thread, only one thread is exist, that is main thread, and main thread create the object of a thread class, that is also executing by main thread. Then we call the t dot start method, but we have not create, look at this, we have not create the start method in thread class. So what will happen if I want to thread, actually thread class is already implement the runnable interface. So if I execute this one t dot start, so there is no class, no thread class is here. Okay. So we have just create the runnable interface. So if I call the t dot start method, then it will call the thread class run method, which is empty implementation. So nothing output will be come. So no output will be come. So what does it mean? So if I want to execute the runnable, execute my runnable class run method, that means we have to pass the object of this class. So when we create a thread t equal to new thread, we have to pass the object of the runnable interface. So what is the object here? R. So this is my, so when we call, so we have to call runnable interface, target runnable interface, and that is called target runnable, So target runnable object will be passed. So when we pass this target R to this, then this part, this run method will be called and it will be executed. Okay. Then after that, if I write something compared to the previous example, so we can write for int I equal to 0, I less than 10, I plus plus, and for example system dot out dot println, so that is main thread, then I publish static void when is completed, then class. Please remember that I am writing this code here just for example, it is not necessary, it is not mandatory to write this code. I am explaining this example, the what is happening in this code. So that's why just I am writing that this part of the code will be responsible for main method, main thread, and that part of the code will be executed by the child thread. So this part of the code will be executed by main thread, and this part of the code will be executed by child thread. So that's why just to differentiate it, how the execution will flow or how the thread will be created. So I am just writing this code, but it is not mandatory to write those. Up to this point is mandatory. So first we have to create the object of a runnable class. So whatever the class that implement the runnable interface, we have to write the object. That means we have to create the object, and that object has to be passed through the thread constructor. If I don't pass the thread constructor, so no the thread class will be created, a new thread will be created, but that thread class will run the own run method, that means own run method, and in thread class the run method is empty implementation. So that means nothing has been written there, so don't override the run method. So it means I am not overriding this class run method. Okay. So to execute the target runnable run class, so we have to pass the object of this class when we creating a thread, then we have to call the start method. This is the difference between the first case and second case. if one compare with the first example, you can see that the first example, you can see that we have created a thread, only we have just created thread instance, then we call the start method. So when we extend a class, thread class, we have just create the object of a class, then we will call the object name dot start method, then the start method automatically execute the thread class, new thread class run method. But here the difference is we have to first create the object of a runnable interface. So the object of the class which implement the runnable interface. So this line is very important. After that we have to pass the object through the constructor of thread class. So that means there is a link, that means I want to say that it will execute the target runnable run method, Otherwise if I don't pass this one, so thread class run method will be executed, and thread class run method is empty implementation. It means that there is no output. Okay. So these two lines is very important. So when we have to create the thread class construct thread object, then we have to pass the runnable interface. So there is a link up between the thread class and runnable interface, and you have to always remember that the thread class is already already implements the runnable interface. You can see that for example, this is my runnable interface, runnable interface, and here is a thread class, and this is my class, okay, thread, and this is my class. So one of the procedure is I am just extending the thread class, one of the procedure, then thread is already implementing the runnable interface, and another procedure is I just implement directly my thread class, my thread class, or whatever it is my thread, the name of the class, I am just directly implement the runnable interface. So this is called implementing runnable interface, and this procedure is the first approach by extending the thread class, and this is the second approach, implementing the runnable interface. So that is the difference between the two approach. First approach is my class thread runnable interface, extend the thread class, and second is directly implement the runnable interface. Now the next question is, there are so many questions maybe arise, which approach is best for you. So we will discuss in a few seconds. So right now from this example, what are the case we can consider? So what are the terminology you have to remember when we use the implementing by runnable interface? So let us say in this example we have so many points is come in our mind, that first if I write my runnable are equal to new minor runnable then if I create a thread, for example thread T1 equal to new thread, and we have created another thread instance, another thread object, for example T2 with passing runnable interface. So it is a valid point that we can create more than one object of a class. It is a valid point, the object name is different, so that means we are creating more than one object of a class. It is a valid. So what are the cases may be arise? So what are the terminology you have to keep that mind? So if I consider case 1, what will happen if I call T1 dot start? And if I call case 2, so if I call T1 dot run method, and in case 3 if I called T2 dot start method, in case 4 what will happen if I call T2 dot run method. In case 5, let me another side, case 5 if I call on the instance of this object r dot start method, and case 6 r dot run method. So, from this example if I want to implement defining a thread by implementing runnable interface, so there are 6 cases maybe arise, and we will explain one by one in details. So, what will happen? So, we consider the 6 cases. First case is T1 dot stat. What will happen? So, we have a 3 line my runnable r equal to new runnable. It's okay. I have created the instance of a class, also I have created object of this class, of my class, and then we have created 2 objects of a thread class. One of the object is T1, another object is T2, and one of the object is created without passing the target runnable interface object, and second constructor just we are passing the target runnable, so that it will execute the my target runnable run method. So, in first case consider the first case when T1 dot start, is there any new thread is created? So, when we call the T1 dot start means is there a new thread is created? Look at this, is there any new thread is created? I have already discussed that the new thread will be created, because the new thread will be created which is responsible for executing of the thread dot run method. Because in this example when we call the T1 dot start method, so it will what we will call, it will call the thread class start method, and thread class start method we will call the thread class run method, and thread class run method means it's a empty implementation. So, that means there is no output. But is that true that new thread will be created? Of course, it is true that new thread will be created, but because when we call the thread start method, every time a new thread will be created. But if I do not call the start method, no new thread will be created. So, in this example, in case 1 we can say that a new thread is created. That is responsible for executing the run method of a thread class, but the thread class run method is a no implementation. So, it is a empty implementation run method, that means I will not get any output, okay. So, it is clear to the first method. So, first thing is the new thread will be created, but this thread will responsible for executing the run method of a thread class. Now come to the second point, second case, when if I call the run method directly of this T1 dot run. So, T1 dot run. So, T1, look at this, without runnable interface, what will happen? So, no new thread will be created. We know that if I directly call the run method, so just is a normal method of method calling, because if I want to call the run method, so there is no separate thread will be created. So, in this program if I call the run method, so only one thread is present, that is main thread, no other thread will be created. The other thread is created only when we call the start method. But in this example I have not called the run start method. So, in case if I write T1 dot run method, so it is a normal execution like a normal method call, okay. So, next next case, let's consider the next case when we call the t2.start method. So this one, t2.start method. So that means we have already passed the target runnable interface. If I call t2.start method, we have already seen in our. Now move on to the next case. This is third case, where if I use t2.start method, what will happen if you call t2.start method? You have already seen that here t2 is the object which is created when we pass the thread, or when we create the object we pass the target runnable object. So that means it is responsible for, so new thread will be created. Of course when we call the start method, that new thread will be created, but this thread, a new thread, is responsible for the execution of my runnable class run method. It's responsible for executing my runnable class run method. So this method will be executed. So my runnable run method will be executed. Runnable run method will be executed. Okay. Now consider the fourth one, t2.run. So I have already explained that when we call a run method, it does not create a new thread. So that means it will not create a new thread of execution. It's just simply call this run method, but it's a normal call. So under one thread, that is main thread, will execute the run method. No separate thread will be created if I call the t2.run method in case of case 4. Now move to the next case, case 5. So if I call add.start method, that means t2.start is already called, and after that if I called again the start method, what will happen? So a thread is already created, and again if I call the start method, it does not mean that again new thread will be created. So we will get a compile type error saying that my runnable class does not have the start capability. So in case 5 we will get a compile time error. And it says that my runnable class does not have a start capability. So it will give the message can't find symbol method start location my class runnable. In sixth case, the last case, if I consider add.run, so same thing, no new thread will be created under the my runnable run method. So it will execute the normal method call. So about the cases we can consider from the runnable interface. If I create runnable interface by using or define a thread by using runnable interface, we will consider those 6 cases. So now what is the advantage, or which approach we are going for to recommend it? Whether we go for the extending a thread class or whether we go for the implementing the runnable interface. You can see that if I want to create a thread by extending a class, so that means we will not extend more than one class. So already there is extend of thread class. So we know that we cannot extend more than one class in Java at the same time. So we will not benefit of inheritance property. So that means we will lose the inheritance property if we use extended of a class. So another thing is, if I go for the implementing runnable interface, if I want to define a thread by using runnable interface, so there is no extents of a class because thread class is already implementing runnable interface. So we have an option to create So we have a chance to extend another class also. So this is the best approach. Most of the time we'll recommend it to implement the runnable interface, to create or define a thread for runnable interface, because here we are not losing the advantage of inheritance. So inheritance property keep in safe in case of second approach. It might be some other causes where other reason where the runnable interface is more performance is very well, and some other issue might be, but we will always recommend it to create a thread by implementing runnable interface, because we will not miss the opportunity of object oriented inheritance property. So far we have discussed about how to define a class, how to define a thread. There are two approaches. One of the approach by extending a thread class, and the second approach is implementing runnable interface. We can define a thread or we can create a thread. The second approach, we will always recommend it to use the second approach, because we do not lose the advantage of inheritance property. But if I use the first approach, we will lose the benefit of inheritance property in object-oriented programming. So that's all about the way of creating a thread. Thank you. So that's all.